Before we begin, there are some guidelines we're going to have to adhere to when we make our thumbnails. The first one being dimensions. We're going to want to make our YouTube thumbnail a specific dimension. Now, typically it's going to be 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720. Most people opt for 1280 by 720 solely because they can fit lower resolution images and make them actually look good in those 1280 by 720s as opposed to 1920 by 1080s. Once you move up to the higher resolutions, you're going to have to scale those images bigger and bigger, and they will lose their quality. Not just this specifically, but most of the time your thumbnails are going to be located on the right side of YouTube. They're not going to be scaled up too much unless somebody's watching it on a big screen TV or a big monitor, but even then the chances of your thumbnail getting scaled up to that degree is very low. So most people just stick with the 1280 by 720, mainly because it's easier to work on a smaller canvas. You don't lose image quality on assets that you're importing into Photoshop or GIMP or whatever image editing software you're using. And also, when they do scale up a 1280 by 720 picture, it's not going to look too terrible. Of course, you can go 920 by 1080 if that's what you're used to working with. It doesn't really matter too much, but it is definitely easier to work on a smaller canvas. Next up, we want our thumbnails to be eye-catching. Of course, this is pretty self-explanatory. If you pull up a video, you start watching it, you look to the sidebar, there's a list of other videos. You want your video to stick out among the crowd, and there are a lot of ways to go about doing this. The whole point is to draw attention to your thumbnail. Some people go with the big, bulky, blocky fonts and make it yellow, make it orange, make it a bright, vibrant color so people will look at the right sidebar and right away see that orange or blocky yellow font, and that will stick out and cause potentially a click to happen. Also, people add borders to the outside of their thumbnails as well. Typically, you want to stick it to the same vein, use a bright, vibrant color such as yellow, red, orange, like neon green is another one. Also, highlighting or using circles, arrows, etc. in the thumbnail to kind of point out what's happening in the thumbnail. If you have a picture of like Bigfoot or something, you want to put a big circle, a red circle around Bigfoot and have an arrow pointing at it, because people are going to be drawn to the arrows, drawn to the circles. Also, using big strokes on your images or your fonts to create a border around, say you have a transparent cutout of yourself or something you're working with, like a video game character or something like that, creating a big border around that character. And of course, another vibrant color like yellow, red, or hot pink or neon green will draw attention to that specific area. And that's kind of how YouTube is right now. You want to get the most attention you possibly can. You're pretty much screaming at the person, click me, click me. When you do these little tactics, create the most distracting, pretty much, thumbnail you possibly can. Now, of course, using these tactics can backfire if you go a little bit overboard. So that's another thing I would like to stress. Have a little restraint. If you get a little too annoying, if you start to put a whole bunch of little emojis, a little circles, arrows everywhere, bright pink, bright orange, bright red, everything like combined in a one little annoying thumbnail. A lot of people do have kind of a recognition of clickbaity thumbnails, and if they see something that's extremely annoying to them, there's a chance they might either report it to YouTube or just not click on your video. Both would be a bad thing, so kind of steer clear of that and keep an open mind when creating your thumbnails. Create something that you yourself would click on if you're watching a video similar to yours. If it's something that you enjoy yourself, or if it's a thumbnail that you create that you think is going to provide a lot of results, go ahead and try it out. If it doesn't work, you can always change it up later. Next up, we have copyrights. Now, copyrights are a big deal on YouTube, and unfortunately, thumbnails are not exempt from this law. They are pretty lenient when it comes to copyrights on thumbnails. Typically, most thumbnails that are created are going to fall under fair use, but if you feel the need to copy somebody else's thumbnail or just straight out steal it, that's where things get scary, because YouTube will strike you with copyright strikes, and after 3 copyright strikes, your channel will be deleted without question. So do be very careful if you decide to kind of loosely follow somebody else's thumbnail. Try not to be extremely similar. Try to have your own differences. Do not copy them word by word or image by image, and also do not steal somebody else's thumbnail, because those are both big no-nos. And if somebody watches both videos and notices they have the same thumbnail, there's a high chance they will report it to YouTube, and YouTube will do a small little investigation and give you one of those copyright strikes. So that's one thing to keep in mind when making your thumbnail. Next up, we have thumbnail rules. Now these don't just apply to thumbnails, but they apply to videos, tags, descriptions, everything involved with the YouTube platform. And you want to keep this in mind when making your videos, making your thumbnails, and just filling out your description, all this stuff. So one thing is, you want to avoid using misleading thumbnails or video titles or video descriptions or tags, because YouTube has a big thing against this and will actually give you a community guideline strike. And community guideline strikes are just as bad as copyright strikes. 3 of these in your channel will be deleted as well. So kind of fudging the line over and over could result in your channel getting deleted. So overall, it's just not worth it. You want to stay away from using misleading thumbnails, strictly because it doesn't take YouTube to kind of flag your channel or your video, your thumbnail. It just takes one miscellaneous viewer who just stumbles upon your video and notices that the thumbnail doesn't match the content, and they just report that to YouTube. YouTube then comes, investigates, and realizes they were right and gives you that strike. So that's a big no-no. Make sure your thumbnail represents what your content is about, what your video is about. That way you can avoid this completely. Also, the tags, the descriptions, the title of your video, all this stuff falls under the same little umbrella. So make sure you're careful and do as YouTube asks. Also, of course, these are no-brainers. No graphic or violent images, no nudity or sexual images, no hateful or racist images. All of these are no-nos, and if YouTube sees them, if they stumble upon your video and there's any of these things inside the video or on the thumbnail, your channel could just get deleted right off the bat. So do not do any of those things. It's just not worth the risk, and it's best just to keep it safe. And if you think you might have something related to like a rule violation, it's best just to restart, to remake the video, remake the thumbnail, and start from scratch.